It's happening. It's happening like the Bible said. The Holy Scriptures foretold the signs of the last days prophecies. And now, ladies and gentlemen, they're happening. This is urgent. This is breaking news. There are multiple reports hitting the news media channels now that an imminent missile attack on Syria by the West is expected at any time. Now in response to the latest chemical attack by the Syrian regime. We've been seeing this come in now on the all the different news media channels here in the U.S., also in Europe. That is just coming from multiple directions that really show that this seems to be building up and about to happen. And it has potentially huge prophetic import as well for us as Bible believers today. All day today, and those of you that follow our Signs of the Last Days ministry, you saw how we posted video about this today. All day today at the UN, Russia and the U.S. have traded shots back and forth at each other at the UN over the latest chemical attack by the Syrian regime in Duma, Syria. The Russian representative said the incident in Duma was staged, and that's what they said about the last one a year ago, whenever Assad's Syrian regime had killed many people with a chemical attack a year ago, which the U.S. responded to with a missile strike. That was a year ago. Now, a year later, Assad has done it again. Every time he gets into a tight spot with some rebels and some communities that aren't doing what he wants, aren't responding the way that they need, then they'll hit with another chemical attack. And so, you know, Russia a year ago said it was staged. They're saying now this is staged. Of course, we know what kind of country Russia is and the leadership of Russia is. And also Russia is saying that any U.S. military action in response to it could have grave repercussions. And at the same time, U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley at the UN said Russia had the blood of Syrian children on its hands, and that the U.S. would see the monster of the Syrian regime held to account. But now, there are reports in the U.S. and also other world locations, including Britain, France, and Syria itself, and also Russia, that indicate that there's an imminent attack by the West coming at any time on the Syrian regime of Assad for his latest use of chemical weapons. But it's also said that the attack will not be just by the U.S., but it will be a coordinated joint attack by the U.S., Britain, France, and perhaps Israel in some manner supporting. We already know that U.S. President Donald Trump has gone on record as saying that he and his generals are making a decision in the next 24 to 48 hours what they will do with respect to the latest horrible chemical attack that was made there near Damascus. And he said that it will be met forcefully. Now, when Trump said that, he was joined by his newly appointed National Security Advisor, John Bolton, along with Vice President Mike Pence, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford. Now, Trump had already tweeted this. He had said, "Many dead, including women and children, in mindless chemical attack in Syria. Area of atrocity is in lockdown and encircled by Syrian army, making it completely inaccessible to outside world." And then he said, President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing animal, Assad, and that there will be a big price to pay. Trump said he would hold whoever was responsible for the attack accountable. And then he said later, we can't let atrocities like we all witnessed happen in our world. Trump said, especially when we're able to, because of the power of the United States, because of the power of our country, we're able to stop it. And that no matter if it's Russia, if it's Syria, or if it's Iran, or if it's all of them together, that would not stop the U.S. from taking action, which is the very same thing that U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley was saying at the UN today. Now, it's also being reported in Britain that a Syrian missile attack is within hours from now, that the Eastern Mediterranean is on high alert, and they said that British and French forces could launch an imminent missile strike on Syria within a matter of hours. That was per UK news media that was quoting aviation monitors. They said that a coalition force could fire air-to-ground or cruise missiles in response to the horrifying chemical attack on innocent civilians in Syria. They also said that aviation experts that they named AirLive have reported this evening a rapid alert notification warning that went out to aircraft in the area of the Eastern Mediterranean for them to be wary, careful of a sudden missile strike. AirLive said the alert was issued by Eurocontrol this evening for a possible launch within the next 72 hours. That's what AirLive said. According to reports, British forces are mobilizing at their bases in Cyprus, and fighter jets could take off from Saint-Nazaire Air Base in France for possible strikes against Syria. It was also reported that earlier today, British Prime Minister Theresa May and U.S. President Donald Trump spoke by telephone, and they agreed that the Syrian chemical attack was utterly reprehensible. And of course, we all know how that Britain just went through a chemical attack being done on their own soil, which they said they are sure was done by Russia, by agents of Russia. But British Prime Minister May, President Trump, agreed that this Syrian chemical attack was utterly reprehensible and that the international community must respond to uphold the worldwide prohibition on chemical weapon use. A White House statement said Trump and May agreed not to allow the use of chemical weapons to continue. Very powerful, strong statement. And Ms. May had earlier agreed the same thing in a call, they report, with French President Macron. And before meeting with his generals, Trump had called Macron, we're told, who Macron has also threatened military action if the Syrian regime is proven to have carried out a chemical weapons attack. Then after the call, the White House issued a statement saying the U.S. and French presidents would continue their coordination in responding to Syria's atrocious use of chemical weapons. And it's interesting also, President Trump canceled a trip he had this week out of the country to South America, with the White House saying that Trump would stay in the U.S. in order to oversee the American response to Syria and to monitor the developments from that around the world. For Trump has been having these ongoing meetings with military officials in the White House to determine the U.S. response to this new Syrian regime chemical weapons attack against its own people. But Russia is warning the U.S. against any military action against Syria, saying that would be unacceptable to them, and that it will lead to the most serious consequences, with the Russian ambassador saying that a U.S. military action in response could have grave repercussions. The latest reports are saying that President Trump and his advisors are weighing a much more robust retaliatory strike against Syria this time than last year's missile attack, reasoning that only an escalation of force would look credible and possibly serve as a deterrent against further use of chemical weapons on Syrian civilians. And it's said that U.S. Navy warships and warplanes in the Mediterranean Sea region are in position for what orders there may be. So this is a very dangerous time now, with Trump having called out not only Assad as a murderous animal, but also called out Putin in the same sentence, and saying that there will be a forceful response, evidently, if the news reports are correct, in concert with Western allies. And the signs are pointing toward an imminent, strong missile attack, probably on the Syrian regime command and control military structure, which means that Russian forces could also be potentially harmed. And Russia has said that it will defend itself and its allies there in Syria. Now, these are all signs of the last days prophecies, where Revelation 9 points out that this very area of Syria along the Euphrates River will be where a final biblical world war will start that could trigger end of days prophecy fulfillment. In fact, this biblical world war that will start here in this area, the prophecy goes on to say in Revelation 9 that it will mushroom until an absolute 1/3 of the population of the earth will be killed. So it will be horrific. And could this situation now be a defining moment for the world that has prophetic import and prophetic impact that triggers a series of events bringing about serious last days prophecy fulfillment? For the world, they should prepare for the beginning of the end in the coming great tribulation of the world. But for those born-again believers of Jesus Christ, look for the beginning of a beautiful new future with Jesus in the coming kingdom of God.